Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me today when we will talk about marketing art in games. And we will have a look at why marketing art is important. We will understand what to expect when you start with marketing art, whether if you're new to the industry or you're moving from doing game art to marketing art, how to set yourself up for success, and some practical advice. With that, allow me to put a little bit of a disclaimer. So the rights to the creative assets that I'm going to be showing as examples, of course, belong to the respective studios and publishers that have developed the games. And also some of the images that I'm going to show you have been manipulated for teaching purposes. With that out of the way, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Raluca Percec, and I am a marketing consultant. I have started my career in the games industry back in 2005. Since then, I have been fortunate enough to work with both game studios and publishers, and I have been managing creating teams for more than 15 years. Now, I've been working on more than 100 titles until today, and I've worked with both original IPs and also licenses from companies such as Marvel, DC Comics, Fox Universal, Tom Clancy, and Chuck Norris. That was a little bit about me. Now, let's get into it. Why is marketing art important? Well, the obvious answer to this question is, well, it's required by platforms, right? So no matter what type of game you're going to be working on, if it's for consoles, if it's for mobile devices, if it's something for PC or Mac, even if you just plan to put it on your own website, you cannot escape doing marketing art for it. And that's because creatives are 50% of your marketing, if not more. And here, I don't just mean in terms of volume of work, although that's already true, but also in terms of the impact that you can have. And that's because marketing art can make the difference between having 100,000 downloads when you launch your game or some millions. And even after you have launched your game, creatives are the key to keeping your user acquisition profitable. And here, I have an example where we have a test that I've run some years ago with a studio that I've been working with, and we were testing two new icons against the one that was currently on the store. Now, the only difference between these two new icons was that one of them had a blue background and one of them had a red background. Now, as you can see here in the lower right corner, the difference in performance was quite significant. So imagine if your performance can be improved by optimizing just one asset, what kind of a difference you can make when you optimize all the assets that you have on your stores and the one that you put on your campaigns. So that's a big impact that you can have. Great, so now that I've got you a little bit, hopefully, hyped about the difference you can make, I have to also tell you that being a marketing artist in the games industry is no picnic, and it comes with its own little set of surprises. And the first one that I want to talk about is that there's a myth going on that if it looks good, players will click on it. Well, not really. If you've come to the industry with that expectation, and your expectation looks something like this, then you're in for a big surprise. Because marketing is also about performance. And this is the games industry. Everything looks good out there, right? And if that's the only thing that you've got going on for you, that it looks good, then players might not be impressed. All right, so this brings me to my next point, and that's that you will almost never create only one asset for one purpose if you work in marketing art for games. You're going to have to get comfortable with A/B testing, and you're going to be doing a lot of it. And now, sometimes it gets to the extent that you could be doing 2-3 waves of A/B testing before you put something on your store. You could be testing first for the direction, then for the composition, and then for some small details. And all of this is part of working in the games industry. And here I have an example of a couple of banners that I have tested with one of the studios that I've been working with. This was quite a few years back. Now, when you first look at it, you might think, there's not really a big difference between all of these assets. It's not very impactful. However, I can tell you that the top left banner performed 12% better than the next one and 30% better than the lowest performing one. And that's really a huge difference. And this goes to show that you cannot just guess how players will react to the art that you create. You have to test for it. And you might be surprised. Now, the next thing you're going to need to get used to is that you're going to have a lot of impromptu conversations with people all over your company. Because everything that is either important or comes unexpected comes with some form of request that's going to land on your desk. And that's normal when you work in marketing art. So you need to be comfortable talking to people, because it's not longer just you, your tablet, hiding behind two big screens. It's about communication. And you're going to be talking to people not only in your marketing department, but all over the company. Because unless you are working in a really, really big studio, and they have, say, one dedicated marketing art department that has its own art producers, and that producer is going to filter all the requests that come your way, or you're maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum, where actually what happens is that you're the only artist in the game, and it's just you, one coder, and one sales guy doing a game. Everything in between comes with this phenomenon that people just drop by your desk or disrupt your work, and you need to get comfortable with that. Now, this might sound like a big hurdle, but there are some mitigations that go with it. First of all, if you're not working with really, really senior people who have been briefing assets before, then you're going to do yourself a favor if you're going to educate them a little bit, because most of them will not know how long what takes. And you're going to need to communicate that with them. Also, you're going to need to hone in on your prioritization skills, because the salesperson will not know what the marketing specialist asks from you, and also the producer wants something. The CEO is going to have some pitch somewhere, his game, and he needs a presentation that you have to look at. And all of that could come at the same time. Of course, this sounds like it's really intimidating, but there are ways to get yourself prepared for this, and we're going to talk about those a little bit later in the presentation. Now, the second myth that I want to talk about when it comes to marketing art is the one where people say that it should be or is mostly about gameplay. Now, this is not exactly true. And I'm not telling you to go out there and misrepresent your game. You should never do that. You should never, ever, ever, ever try to deceive your players. That's not what we're talking about today. But we are talking about the possibility of blending real-life elements with game elements and creating something really, really strong that connects with your audience. And when I say this, most people imagine something like this, where you have some sort of game that has a strong personality that is part of the game, and then, oh, okay, reality and game are mixing. And that's fine, of course. But what I would like you to think about is more the possibility that you take your game and you place it into a real-life concept, and you make it connect with the audience. And this is done extensively in the mobile games industry, where every third ad that I see on the marketplace, it's about some people who are super happy, and they're buttoning and sliding on their devices and looking super interested. But it is also done in AAA. And my favorite example with that is a trailer that was done several years ago. It's the FIFA 18 More Than a Game trailer. And I will show it to you today. Hopefully it works. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not exactly the target audience for FIFA, but I gotta tell you, when I saw this ad, I was super impressed. And I really loved the way that they blended ideas coming from the game to the real life and going back and everybody going ballistic. And this is something you could try to do. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is that not everything that you're going to be making in marketing is going to be in the same aspect ratio or even orientation as the game. Now, I see this a lot with artists. They're like, my game is 1920 by 1080, and I'm going to create wonderful art pieces in that size, and I'm going to be done. But that's not what happens, people, because no matter where you're going to be, which platform you're going to be publishing your game on, it comes with its own set of requests. And because Steam is kind of one of the most popular that everybody knows about, I have a list here of all the assets that are required if you even just want to publish your game on Steam. That's the whole list. And you can see there are some, in the second column, there are some marked with red, and only 4 marked as optional. Everything that's red is requested, the other 4 are optional. Now, my advice to you, when you see something like this, always do the optional art, because that gives you a little bit more of a chance to get your visibility when there's something going on the platform. But coming back to my previous point, when you look at them, how they look as examples, as actual assets, it looks like this. So you can see, except for maybe the screenshot here, everything else does not really fit completely with the aspect ratio of the game. So you're going to be doing a lot of compositing to create all of these sizes. Do not have other expectations. Now, the next thing, you cannot talk about games without talking about localization. And when you work in marketing art, localization comes with everything. I know this may sound a little bit of a hurdle, but it's really, really important. And it's not going to go away anytime soon, because the trend nowadays is that more and more languages are being supported on the stores. All the platforms are increasing the number of languages that are supported. I have here a graph. Basically, Steam supports nowadays 26 languages, Epic Store 17, PlayStation Store 30, Xbox 27, Nintendo 17, iTunes 39, and Google Play 49. And more people prefer to play the games and also see their ads in the language of their devices. Remember, I said the language of their devices, not of their country. There's a difference. But that's a whole other presentation. I'm not going to get into it. Now, another thing that I need to mention about localization, most people think it's only about replacing the texts from English to some other language. And while that's the most of it, you might also need to do a little bit of polishing on your art when you're localizing for specific countries, because there could be some guidelines that you need to be aware of. For example, I've done a game a few years back. It was a game set in the World War II, and some of the characters in there had the uniform from World War II, and to my surprise, my team had to, when we wanted to publish to Germany, my team had to paint over all the swastikas because that is not allowed. Similarly, if you have a game with a lot of cute outfits and female characters, and you plan to submit that somewhere to Saudi Arabia, you're going to have to paint long sleeves and very tight necklines for all your female characters, otherwise your game is not making it in there. So it's not just the text. Okay, now on average, games are being translated in 15 or more languages. And the more you go towards smaller devices, so the PC, I think it's between 10 and 15, consoles about the same, but the more you go towards mobile and smaller devices, the more languages you're going to find. Now, what is it about making art for marketing? If you've been in this industry even just a little bit, you probably have had some requests like this. I need a banner in so-and-so size with the main character holding the new weapon. And that's your brief. Or even worse, you have somebody telling you, can you do something like this? And they're pointing to some other game and make it look nice. Now, if you're being briefed like this, I'm sorry to say, you as a marketing artist are not being used at half of your potential. It's true, and your studio is poorer for it. But that is the industry that we are in, and I see a lot of faces looking at me right now thinking, well, I get what you're saying, but it's not like I can change the way my studio works all by myself. I know you are right, that's true. However, it's a pity, because the marketing artist has the potential to become the driving force of marketing success. When you have the right frameworks, and your company works in the right way, and does marketing the right way, and the communication is there, something happens that you can do more than be just a simple executor. However, unfortunately, the opposite is also true. So if you are only executing on somebody else's concepts, sooner or later, you might end up a burnt resource. Nobody wants to be that. Now, if you're like most of the marketing artists that I know, you're probably not planning to barge into your boss's office Monday morning going like, hey, so, you know, I've seen this talk at GIC, and this Raluca lady told me that you're not using me at my full potential, you're not setting me up for success, and by the way, your briefs suck. So if that's not what we're going to do, although if you want to have that conversation, maybe don't use the words I just did, but it's a good conversation to have. And if your boss doesn't believe you, have them contact me. I will be happy to advocate for you. However, this doesn't happen overnight. There's a really long process. I have spearheaded this process with studios, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of commitment from the entire company. The results are amazing, but it doesn't happen overnight. So the question that remains is, well, what can I do right now that I don't become this burned resource? And that's what we're going to talk about next. We're going to look at understanding the purpose behind the assets that you're going to create. We're going to look at making sure that you have all the guidelines that you need to create whatever it is that you are creating. And we're going to look at understanding the context of where your art is going to end up. And we will start with the purpose. Now, you can do this by asking simple questions, and I promise you those are non-controversial. You have the right to ask those questions. Nobody's going to yell at you, okay? So here goes. The first question, it might sound really stupid and obvious, but you would be surprised how many briefs I've seen that don't contain this basic piece of information, and that's, what the hell campaign am I working on? Yeah, that's true. As if there weren't so many possibilities out there. Really, doing marketing. You could be working on anything, and the last thing you want to do is to spend your time working on a concept that doesn't fit with the campaign that you are supposed to be working on. So if they forget to tell you, and this happens especially when you have this siloed organization that the marketing thinkers are there in their own room looking at their research, and then they come to you as if you've just been part of the meeting that you were not, and then tell you what you're supposed to be doing. This can happen. So if they don't tell you which campaign it is, just please ask. More than that, you need to understand what audience will be seeing what I'm about to create. And now, I've seen that briefs are getting better that way. Like, people usually include the basics. What's the location of the people? What's the age group? What's the gender? This is information you probably have seen, or not, but I hope you did. Now, this is not enough. I think we can do better. We can dig a lot deeper. Now, the next thing you really need to understand, and it's really important, is, am I talking to new players, or am I talking to existing players? Because now, if you're talking to new players, then you have to put a lot more effort in. You need to make sure that people who know nothing about the game that you're all about can understand it and can grasp the concept at the first glance. Now, that's a little bit hard to do. That's why you usually have a key art, you put a lot of effort in it, and then you reuse it to no end. But when you're talking to an existing fan base, suddenly you have a lot more creative freedom. You can use humor, you can try something new, something interesting. So knowing which kind of players you're talking to, it's quite important. Now, the next thing you should be asking is, what the hell is their motivation? Why are they playing our game? Now, imagine this. Let's say you are working on a strategic game, and your marketing team is segmenting for people who are very competitive, or people who are achievers. They like to be the first in the leaderboards. They are the ones that always play hours and hours just to make sure that they take all of those achievements. And if that's the segment that you're working with, you need to cater your marketing art to respond to that. Now, if you would be talking to some other segment, could be maybe the builders or the collectors, then you won't be wanting to show them leaderboards. You need to be showing them what it is that they can collect in your game. Could be characters, could be objects, could be whatever it is that your game is collecting. So understanding the motivation of the players will help you do better concepts for your art. Now, the last one might not be so obvious. And you need to understand what are the usual obstacles that are preventing your players from picking up games in your niche readily. And this happens, for example, I have been working with a team that was doing a casual RPG. And the biggest hurdle that people were complaining about, they were like, I'm not going to play another casual RPG because the controls are killing me. I don't like to play those. I cannot play it in transit. And I'm done with this genre. And gladly, we were working back then with a game that had really, really easy controls. So we did a lot of marketing assets showing people playing with one hand, people playing while doing something else, and it really worked really well. So knowing this information could help you come up with better concepts. Now, the next thing you need to ask is, what do I want the player to do when they see my asset? And here, again, there are several possibilities. I want them to click on the asset itself, or maybe there's a button somewhere around the asset that they are seeing. Maybe do they need to download something? Is it free? Is it not? Is it for a bundle? Is it with other games? Is it by itself? Am I expecting them to watch some sort of ad? You need to know this information. And more importantly than this, you need to know where they will land once they do this interaction that you are expecting them to do. Now, imagine you are doing some sort of campaign. You're making the assets for a campaign that is related to a game event, right? And let's say your asset looks something like this. However, this is not very in line with how the game usually looks like. And let's imagine that you put this asset inside the game. Well, then there's no problem, because they see the asset in the game, and then they move on, and then no harm done. But what if they see it somewhere in an ad? And from there, they land to your game page, and your game page looks something like this. Now, there's a little bit of a disconnection. And then you're going to be wondering, well, if my asset is having a lot of clicks, why do we have a very low conversion rate? That's when people see your asset, go to the store, do nothing. And what you can do is, if instead your game store looks like this, then there's a good flow in there. There's consistency. People will understand it's about the same game. So there are things you can change, but you need to know where the player starts, what they are clicking on, where they are landing, and what's their entire journey until they get to wherever you need them to go, which is ultimately probably either purchasing or downloading your game. Now that we know the purpose, it's time to make sure that we have all the guidelines. And this might sound trivial, but it's sometimes not the case. Now, of course, you need to know everything about the dimensions, resolution, aspect ratio, frame rate if it's a video, and you might not be readily provided with this information. You might be needing to look for it. Also, there could be some surprise that some platforms require a specific format. If you're not informed by this, you need to ask, because you might not be able to upload on the platform. Also, is there a maximum file size or a maximum duration if it's a video? Because the last thing you want to happen is you've worked on all your assets, you've sent them to somebody to upload them somewhere, and then they get this. And it cannot be uploaded because you missed something in the guidelines. It might seem like a quick fix, but in all this chaos of you sending things over, people understanding that, oops, it's not what we needed, coming back to you, asking you to do them again, and then re-uploading everything, you might miss some deadlines. You're for sure going to miss some time, and you're going to be annoyed. So make sure you get your guidelines straight. And also, make sure that you know if the platform does something with your asset after you have sent it. So, in this case, the platform has overimposed a text over the banner of the game. So you submit the banner without any text, and they put the text on top. Now imagine you didn't know this, and you made an asset that looked something like this. It looks better by itself, but when it gets to the platform, the text goes there, and then you're like, okay, well, this is not what we wanted. So understanding the guidelines is going to help you. Furthermore is knowing the context. Now, the first thing you need to know is where the hell will it appear? And of course, it could be inside the game. Maybe you're doing some kind of event notification. It could be inside a different game if you're doing cross-promotion. It could be on your own page, and then it's surrounded by things that look like your game, which comes to your advantage. It could be on a store on a third-party page, which means that people are seeing it together with other games, and it could be on a specific section in that store. Then you need to know how it will be displayed. Will it be on a light background, on a dark background? Will it be by itself, or will it be surrounded by other games? And in the end, what I suggest that you do here is you take a screenshot of how to preview your asset before you send it. So you take a screenshot of how it will look like. I'm going with Steam again. And then you do your asset, and you create a mock-up where you replace one of the games on the store with the one that you've just created. And this usually could lead to you wanting to make some changes, because it changes how people will see your art. It's not always by itself. Now, for some practical advice. The first advice I'm going to give you is gather your resources in advance. Now, when you work in marketing art, you're going to be handed a lot of urgent requests, and they're going to come out of nowhere. And sometimes it's not because your coworkers didn't know to plan well ahead, it's because that's the nature of the business. I don't know, some investor showed interest, you need to do a presentation, it needs to be sent tomorrow, your CEO doesn't have time for you to complain that, you know what, you're telling me too late. So you have to get some assets ready in order to, and some resources that you can work with quickly to get to the deadline that you have to respect. And In this case, you should have your splash screen, you should have, or game art or key art or whatever it is that it's called in your organization. I've seen many, many different names. You should have it in high resolution, because you're going to be surprised how many times people say, by the way, can you also do a print version? I want to put it on a t-shirt. So try to have it in high resolution and ask for all your game fonts. This is going to come in handy to you. Make sure you have your main characters in several poses and with different facial expressions. This will help you do compositions. This will help you do some things that are really interesting for the players. You could create something really, really cool. And you can have characters say something that maybe they wouldn't say normally in the game, create some humor, do some interesting things. You're going to need probably a marketing build. Now, this one is a hard resource to come by, because you have to tell your organization to make it very early, before your game launch is even on the horizon. Now, some of them might not provide you with this resource. They could provide you only some cheats, and that's it. If that's what you've got, you're going to work with it. But if you do have a chance to get a marketing build, that's going to help you speed up your work. For example, and one of the really cool things that you can get in there is if you can disable the UI and the text of the UI separately in the marketing build. This will allow you to capture some things that are super interesting without the UI. You can use them later on, either on your social media, or you can create some compositions with it. But also, when you do localization, if you are able to just activate the UI and then use Photoshop to change your texts, it's going to go much faster than if you're going to either do that manually, just erase the text and then fill in and then try to replace them, or worse, if you have to capture the same screenshot in several different languages and change the language in your build and just capture all over again. That's hours and hours of work that you don't need to be doing. Now, it's also going to be useful if you have some UI elements on transparent background, because you can use this in presentations. You can have that, for example, if you're having a pitch somewhere, you're pitching your game, and you're going to be using some of these UI elements in your presentation. It's going to look more like a game. It's a nice detail. People who are looking at your presentation are going to be I wouldn't go so far to say impressed, but it's a nice detail. And also make sure you get your hands on some environment art and have it handy, because at some point, whatever it is that your key art looks like, it's going to get old. You're going to be doing a lot of assets for social media, for optimization in your marketing campaigns, and just reusing the same old is going to get old really fast. Now, the next advice that I have for you, when you make your key art, do it at least in 4K, even if your game is 1920 by 1080, maybe even 8K, because it's going to help you when you do all of those sizes for the platforms that they need. Also, create a landscape and portrait version of your key art or splash art, whatever you call it, from the beginning. Now, I remember one of the first games that I worked on was Prince of Persia: Warrior Within. When I started in games, I wasn't working in marketing just yet, but I still remember and I still cringe when I saw the landscape version looking like this. I have no words. Now, 2 years after that, when I was actually working in marketing, things had started to get better. We've got resources looking like this. Things were moving. It was a little bit nicer. But what I actually would advise you to do is, when you have a key art created, either if it's you who's making it, or if it's some of your colleagues, or if you have an agency, try to ask them to add a lot of bleed. And my rule of thumb is at 30% bleed all around. This is an example of a really cool key art, and the small square that you see highlighted in the middle is actually, so this part here is actually the splash screen of the game, and everything else that it's a little bit darker all around is the bleed. And this helps immensely as a resource, because you can take different parts of the same asset and create different compositions that you need to fit in all those requirements from the platforms. Now, we cannot talk about advice in marketing art if we don't talk about organization. So whatever you do, properly group and layer everything. I know you know this, but I have to say it. Also, take the time to name your layers, because in 3 months' time, you're not going to remember what the hell Rails 658 copy 19 was all about. So please do that. Now, when you're talking about your key art, and I'm sorry if I keep repeating key art, but it is the most useful resource in your game, so we have to talk about it, is make sure that everything in your key art is fully drawn, even behind some of the elements. Now, if your key art looks like this, and you need to create some banner from it, and you want to move the logo, what you'd be wanting to see behind is something like this, and not this. So, and this doesn't only go for logos. The logo is the obvious one, but imagine you have a character, behind the character there's a tree, and when you move your character, you don't want to have half a tree behind it. So always make sure everything is fully drawn. Now, before you're done, before you submit anything to anyone, if you're doing marketing art, make sure that it looks good both in big and small sizes. Now, it doesn't matter really which type of game you're creating. Even if your game only works on PC and that's it, somebody somewhere is going to see it on their mobile device. Because when you do marketing art, it's going to appear in some press release somewhere that somebody can read on their phone. And if it looks like this, and you cannot read what the hell the logo was when it's in a smaller size, then you've missed your mark a little bit. And the opposite also goes. If you're only doing it, and it looks good on a mobile device, but when it appears on your desktop is a little bit crappy, again, you've missed your mark. So make sure it looks good in both sizes. Now, the next thing is about outsourcing. It will always come a time when you're doing marketing art that you cannot handle everything by yourself. It's humanly impossible. And at some point, you're going to have to work either with a freelancer or an agency, and they're going to help you do something that for marketing. And that's when you need to be aware that you're going to be the one who will have to reuse this resource later in your art. So always ask for the source files and ask for editable resources. If it's about static images, this is really simple, because you're going to ask for the layered PSD, and you're done. Related to what we've just talked before, make sure you move elements around, and you make sure that they have drawn that tree behind the character, right? But when it comes to videos, this gets a little bit harder. And also with videos, you're going to be asked to do a shorter version of your video. And now, it's easier for static images because everybody can work with a PSD. But if you have Premiere installed on your PC, and then this is what you're working with, and then the agency that you've worked with has Cinema 4D, you're not going to be buying a license and trying to get that video to work in Premiere. What you're going to do is you're going to ask the agency to send you separate files, especially tracks for the sound effects and for the background music. That way, when you have to cut into it, you can still keep the sound effects, but you can work with the music that it doesn't sound like it's cut from, that it's cut in the middle. And another tip that I have for you here is when you ask for these resources, make sure it's mentioned at the beginning of the contract. Because sometimes what can happen is that you approve the art that you've just received, and then you haven't received your PSD. You go to them, hi, can I have the PSD file for this amazing key art that you've created for me? And they say, yeah, I'm going to charge you $600 more. And you don't want to be doing that. So make sure you mention it at the beginning of the contract. And that's it, people. That's all that I have for you. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, how do we do this?
Hi. First of all, amazing lecture. That was the best one I ever been here, been on. And my question is, at the beginning of your lecture, you said that there was a big difference even by changing the background, right, from the blue to red or red to blue. And my question is also on which platform that was, and if that was Steam, was the change was from the blue to red or red to blue?
Actually, that one was on Android, so it was on Google Play. And we were testing two new icons. One of them was red, one of them was blue. The blue one performed better, but we were testing it against an icon that we currently had in the game, which was a different concept. I cannot show it here because of NDAs, but yeah.
What was the background of, not the background of the icon, but the rest?
No, it was the actual game icon. And we had the main character, and the background behind the main character was either blue or red.
Thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask also about the A/B testing, but basically what's the difference of the amount of A/B testing in mobile games and with platforms like PC and stuff? Because I worked in a mobile game company for a little bit, and basically there was like so much A/B testing, so much. And then I switched to like consoles and PC, and I feel like I have escaped a bit.
Yes.
So I want to know like if that's like the general kind of idea.
Yes, actually you are completely right. There's a lot more A/B testing going on for the mobile devices, and here is also where platforms help with it. Like Google Play allows you to do A/B testing directly on their platform where you're submitting the game. PlayStation Store doesn't have that. Xbox doesn't have that yet. So there is this general tendency to do a lot more A/B testing for mobile. But I think the trend is that they are trying to do this in AAA. It will not get to the same extent, my impression, but it's going to be there. You're going to face it. Not as much. You are right, the trend is there. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, feel free to send me any questions if they pop up later to my email address. You have it here. And that's it. Thank you very much.